Dear listeners, in my interview with Gina, she talks about her experiences caring for her elderly father, as well as the ordeals she faced accessing veterans care services. Please listen in. Welcome, Gina. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Please share with us a little bit about yourself and what led you in the elder care space.
Sure. My name is Gina, and I'm a contractor. I do operations and community outreach, mostly with the federal government and also campaigns and some other nonprofits. Like all of us, I got into senior care due to having elderly parents. I was in Wisconsin when I got a call from my then 95-year-old dad who had fallen and was in the hospital. And when I called him, he kept insisting, I'm fine, I'm fine. So I flew out there to check how he was. And then I just decided to leave Wisconsin because my contract had already ended and move back to the East Coast.
When you and I spoke, one of the things that really drew my attention was your experience in getting him veterans benefits. And that's something that we haven't really touched upon in my podcast. And I would love for you to share about your experience and tell us how you were able to access veterans benefits. Like, that would be terrific.
So actually, it was our pastor from First Presbyterian Trinity actually had gotten veterans benefits for her mother in the South. So she had told me about it. So I was like, okay, let me start researching. There is the Veterans Administration, of course, in DC, the main one, but each state also has a Veterans Administration. And also, when I was starting to look at assisted living, they actually had also mentioned looking into veterans affairs. So I went there and then started looking, and it's very daunting. It's a very big website on the state as well as the federal. So I did use something called Veteran Cares. They do charge.
Okay.
So because it's a lot of paperwork, you have to get his military records, his discharge records, his health records, his doctor's records, fill out a 25-page document, send it off to the Veterans Administration, hope they get it. And so with the Veteran Care Organization, they do charge, but it was, I think, just helpful for me that they took care of it. And then they followed up with the VA administration. What happens is, from what my research and what they say, it does take maybe 2 to 6 months, depending on how busy they are. Okay. And unfortunately, with the cuts in the Veterans Affairs, it will take longer. The good thing about them is they will not charge you until you get the money.
Okay.
So, I just think it's just so helpful. You could do it on your own, but to be warned, there is a lot of paperwork. You could also, once it's there, you will get a letter saying, we've gotten it and it's under review. So what happens is, every time I got a letter, I would talk to them and see where they are, the Veteran Affairs Organization. You could also call up your congressperson to give them a push. Make sure you will be given a number and where you are. So there's several ways you could do it, but it does take a while. And depending on how many years there are, you will get an average of maybe $1,800 to $2,200 a month for you to either have somebody take care of them, you take care of them, or else you could also use part of it for your assisted living. So I found that really helpful. And there's a lot of information on the Veterans Affairs in DC as well as the state. So I just found that really, really good because the paperwork was just so overwhelming because I was also taking care of my dad at the same time.
Wow, this is extremely helpful and very resourceful. So can you share with us a little bit about what that was like getting the paperwork involved? Because being a vet myself, I remember it was a daunting task. And more specifically, also talk about, if you don't mind sharing, about how did you have to sort of argue or to defend your case per se?
That's why I actually paid the Veteran Cares Organization. They took part of it. I think depending on what you're looking for and how they are, they will take maybe $2,000 to $3,000 for that. And for me, it was worth it. Some people, it might not be worth it, but I just found it really helpful because you have to go to your doctor. They have to do an exam. They have to say, what they can and cannot do. It took the Veteran Cares organization I was working with 2 to 3 times to get to the doctor to have them fill out the paperwork. Then, unfortunately, it's like you have to fax it, you have to send it off to the VA. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to do. And it's just having to deal with bureaucracy. And as a former federal employee, I can tell you there's still a lot of bureaucracy. The federal government loves paper. We still
Right.
use faxes.
Right. Wow. So did you have to then take your dad, accompany him to the doctor for the doctor to do the evaluation, or was it the agency that you hired, Veteran Cares, they did it themselves?
Fortunately, my dad does at that time would see the doctor every 2 or 3 months. So his health was really up to date. Like, was he incontinence? What was his mind? What was his mobility issue? At that time, he was still pretty mobile, but he was at 95 at the time. So, but he was getting old. So he needed more care. Fortunately, we were lucky in that he really didn't need care before that. But as you get older, there's a lot of things. One of the things I did have problems with was getting his discharge paper, because I think there was a big fire with military records. So anything from, I think, 1955 to 1972, a lot
Okay.
of records were destroyed. They didn't even have his discharge paper. They just sent me a letter saying, hey, he served and he was discharged. It wasn't really anything official. It was just a letter that we used. And
Wow.
also, he's never been to a VA hospital. So they have a record of him serving, but never kind of being in the portal. And to try to get into that portal, if you have, I think everyone should use it. Even if you're not going to use the VA hospitals, you should go there and just to try to get a record. I mean, my dad was discharged in 1954, I think, and he's never gone back. He had a really bad experience with the VA hospitals. That's why he's never gone back. But it has gotten better. I have a lot of friends who are veterans and they really like the way that they've used it. And so they're really trying to be more helpful to the vets. But unfortunately, with the cuts, I don't know how long that's going to be.
Got it. So did your dad have sort of basic VA, an updated ID card?
He didn't even have that. As I said, he left in 1955. He didn't have anything.
So he
I
never used any of the VA
no,
benefits until now.
no. I had to like push, saying, "Hey, I need his papers," and they would send me. It's like, well, we don't have the papers. It was like a big, fire. So it's not, especially for the older ones, it's harder for them because they were not really computerized. Hopefully, for people who are there recently, the last 20 years, I think it has been more computerized.
Wow. So so did he have any service connected injuries?
No, he was a JAG during Korea, so in Morocco. So he
Oh
really
wow.
didn't see active. And for World War II, he was still in a kind of basic officer training. So
Mm,
he did go through the military, but he really was not sent to the fight, as they call it.
mm-hmm. And what sort of, because I know that, much older now and he needed the care, and what sort of roadblocks or challenges you experienced while doing this? I know you did hire Veterans Care, but did you experience anything that was sort of outstanding to share?
No, I mean, it was just older. And I think his generation didn't use veterans, what they could give to the veterans, rather as much as the younger generation, because, they were kind of the greatest generation and they were very like, suck it up type of deal. It's like, we're not
Right.
going to use the federal government like some of our younger ones who should be doing it. And it's only recently that they've really looked at the fact that the veterans, they have issues and we should recognize them. But, with his generation, it was like no one talked about that.
Yeah. What about? the mental health evaluation, what was that like?
He really didn't have to. Everything was on paper and physical. So
Hmm.
the doctor filled everything out. If there was an issue, she would sometimes call me, but she knew him very well. I mean, she had been our doctor for like over 20 years. So, and we
Okay.
would see them every 3 to 4 months, depending on how things were. He was also limited his medication. So he was really on kind of like baby medication that was so good. That was good because he was fairly healthy at the time until recently when he went from a walker to a wheelchair.
Hmm. Hmm. I know a lot of, what I focus on is access to healthcare. And what I'm hearing from you is that he did not have access to healthcare after being discharged or after he left the military, right? So, how did you get him back into that portal? Was it through Veterans Care?
It was through Veterans Care. And fortunately, one of the things he did do that was really smart is he had a really good supplementary secondary insurance that he was doing through AARP, which is United. So that's one of the things. And when he got older, like last year, we actually ran out of Medicare. We had to pay extra because he kept falling. And so what happens is when you fall, I don't want to move him, even if he's sliding down on the wall. You never know why he's
Right.
falling or why he's sliding. So I would call 911 and they would send an ambulance. Now, one of the things we had to also do is make sure that we went to the hospital that we like, which was not. So he lives in Newark, so they always want to send him to university.
Right.
But we used to live in West Orange, so we're very, very familiar with St. Barnabas.
Right.
So would I actually would have to be charged like maybe $100 or more to send him to St. Barnabas. But that ambulance, which is paid for by your health insurance, is usually about $400 or $500. And through all the insurance, they would pay like maybe 80, 90%. And then I would pay the additional $100 just to make sure he goes to St. Barnabas.
Okay.
And after that, and also they would, depending on when he goes, he would be there maybe 2 to 3 days, maybe longer, because he has to be analyzed by the doctor and another doctor as well as a physical therapist. And if
Hmm.
you are doing it on like a Friday or a Saturday, they won't see you until Monday because a lot of physical therapy people aren't there Saturday or Sunday. So once he's discharged from the hospital,
Hmm.
you could go to assisted living, but you could only do that if you go from the hospital. If I had taken him home and I wanted him to like see a PTOT, Medicare will not pay for it.
Really?
They will only do it if it's from a hospital to an
And,
assisted living facility. Now,
wow.
depending on how you are doing it, they're supposed to do up to 30 days in Medicare. But I've heard other people saying they only want to cover 20 days. So you have to fight to do the 30 days.
Oh,
And that
PT.
should assisted living that should be covered.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And that should be, it was rehab. So first he
Rehab.
goes from the hospital to rehab. They
Uh-huh.
cover up to 30 days. And a lot of times they will fight you on not to cover that 30 days. So you have to fight back. The rehab will pay for all of their meals, OT and PT, make sure that they want them to be as strong as possible. And if he's not ready, then you could do your secondary insurance depending on how it is. And I fought to get him to another 30 days. So he was there 60 days. So I wanted him to get healthy and as much PT and OT as possible because once I bring him home, I don't want him to fall again.
Got it. So you use your supplement after your 30 days expired, you use your supplement insurance to add another 30 days.
Yes. And depending on how your insurance works, that you could do up to 30 days. But you have to also talk a lot to the social worker. Fortunately, I had worked at a cancer organization, so I'm very familiar with social workers, and they have the best heart. And they will tell you, they'll push for you. One of the things they're not allowed to do, especially St. Barnabas, is they cannot tell you which rehab is better. They will give you a list. So one of the things is you should try to get that list 2 or 3, like a day before he gets discharged and just research
Mm-hmm.
because they're not allowed. I don't know if it's by law or reputation. So I went to one rehab that was, I thought, really good until unfortunately they were sold to a really big for-profit organization. And after that, I felt like everything went down. So I took him somewhere else. So those are
Wow.
the things you need to really look at. I love Google reviews everywhere. So you just type up the address and I'll tell you there's something on there'll say review, and then just hit the newest ones and I'll tell you all about the reviews about, oh, they treated my parents well, they didn't treat my parents well. So you have to do a lot of research on everything that you're doing with them, and also fight. You have to be an advocate, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to start being an advocate the minute he is in a hospital. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a social worker won't tell the nurse who's on duty, or the nurse on duty won't tell the social worker. So sometimes there's like communication gap. Like one
Mm-hmm.
time he was supposed to be sent discharge and he had to stay there 48 hours because they weren't talking to each other.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So one time I thought, I was ready to meet him at the rehab, and then they're like, oh no, he's still here. And I'm like, okay, why is he still there?
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's one of the things, you have to be an advocate. And so in my car, I actually have a little small duffel bag of everything he needs. I have extra pants. He has incontinence like Depends, a bed pad, a sweater, reading materials. So if in case anything happens, I follow that EMS and ambulance, and then he's able to go there and be at the hospital, or else I have extra clothing
Right.
for him so I don't have to go back and forth like a little yo-yo.
Wow. That's terrific. That's a great tip. What, in terms of access to healthcare overall, what has been your experience? I know that it's great that he has his Medicare insurance as well as supplemental insurance. But actually, my question before you answer that, how were you able to get supplemental insurance? Was it something that he had for a while, or?
Yes. Fortunately, he had that for a while, and they actually don't even sell his supplemental insurance anymore. It was so good that they cut it out, I think 10 years ago, because it was good and it covers like almost 100% of everything.
Wow,
So
really?
sometimes when it's so good, the health insurance doesn't want it anymore because it costs them too much money.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And
does
that's
that
really, really sad when you think about it.
is very sad. Does it cover dental and vision as well, or?
It covers vision. He doesn't really do dental
Okay, okay.
because, he's at the
Mhm.
age where he really doesn't have any teeth.
Right. What other issues I would say, or what has been the experience of sort of access in healthcare for him, or you being his advocate and to make appointments or take him to appointments or doctor visits? What has been your experience with that?
His doctors have been pretty good because he's had history with them.
Okay,
Also, one of the things I do when I send him to rehab, like I think Kessler is a really good rehab. So sometimes I'm there and then I would help them like see what he's doing.
okay,
And then also one of the things that happens is that when he does get discharged, they'll let you do like a home visit. Like we use Visiting Nurse of Northern New Jersey, which I love. So
mhm,
a nurse would come in once a week and take his all his vitals, and then we have once a week we have a OT, another one for PT, and a home health aide. So that's like 4 hours that could help you. So it would really help when I see what they're having him do, and so
mhm,
I would actually get a piece of paper or the exercises. So I would ask him to send me the exercises and I would put it on the wall saying, hey, these are the things we need to do. We're not going to do it, of course, every day, but like maybe, if he's lifting his leg 10, 15 times every other day, it does really help him
mhm.
because a lot of the things that you find with the elderly is the balance issue.
Okay.
So even if they're in a wheelchair, I just have him lift this leg like dance in
Mhm,
place, like march in place. And the same thing with his arms. I was going to buy him weights, but I just felt like he would have lost it. So what I did was take those water bottles, I think 12 to 16 ounces. I just used them as weights. So he just did this with the weights.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
something just to save money, and he loses a lot of things, unfortunately. And we knew that he was going to have to go to home. So I started looking at his finances. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we did, was trying to make sure that he doesn't need a expensive cell phone. He doesn't need like all of the TV channels because he was only watching two or three. One of the things they also like with kind of the baby boomers is they love radio. So just get him a small radio. And sometimes that's better than sometimes TV.
Mm.
And once he was at home is I would do a lot of signs, like a lot of labels. Since I don't really cook. So I would buy like something pre-made, either chicken or Chinese food. And I would just divide it and put it in there. So when he's alone, he could just heat that up
Right,
in
right.
small containers. Because what happens is like everyone else, we get forgetfuls. If you have a big container of Chinese food, you're only going to eat a little bit, especially when they don't really have a lot of appetite when they get older.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to leave it out. And then sometimes that's happened. Like I found out, he didn't remember when he took it out and ate. So what happens
Mm.
is I just put them in like little containers and labeled as like broccoli with chicken, heat for 2 minutes. It just
Mm-hmm.
really helps out a lot.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back with you getting the type of part-time care with the home health aide and other services. What was that like accessing or getting the part-time care, and how were you able to then justify that he needed part-time versus full-time care?
There's a limit to how much the Veteran Administration will give you. So you have to you have to use it. I mean, so before I was able to do it by myself, but afterwards, he needed more help. So I did have to hire somebody. Depending on where you are, the home health care is usually about $20 an hour, maybe up to 25 or more, depending. I didn't go through an agency. I just went from word of mouth because
Right,
I did check out some organizations that did home health aid, and they could go up to like $40 an hour. I was like, I couldn't pay that. That was just too
right,
much. I
right,
could pay like $21. And then,
right,
but a lot of them will do it part time. So there's a language barrier, Spanish
right,
so you have to really look into that. Google Translate was my best friend sometimes.
right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what happens is I would like write the instructions in English as well as Spanish and print it out and put it on the wall. But the majority of the time I was with them in the beginning, and then I
Right.
would leave them for like 2 or 3 hours and then just come back to make sure everything was taken care of.
Wow.
It is a full-time job almost, taking care of your parents. It's like having a child
Yes, of
or a
course.
toddler. I tell people I had no husband, no kids, but I did have a toddler with a PhD and a JD.
Right.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and also
Wow.
they're very stubborn. They like routine like everyone else. So you have to be very careful about what you can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about that stubbornness, because that seems to be a common experience with a lot of elders. They don't want help. They don't want to go here. They don't want to go there. What's that like? And how were you able to overcome that?
You have to have a lot of patience. You can't just stick somebody there in assisted living. It makes them very unhappy, and it makes the facility very unhappy if the person's not there. You have to guide them. I mean, after the fifth fall, my dad realized that he couldn't be by himself anymore. And I said, and you have to tell them, it's like, Dad, I can't do this. I cannot be with you every day. So I think if you just keep talking to them and listening to them, that's one of the issues is because like everyone else, they lose power. They still think, oh, I could do this. No, you can't. It's just like everyone else is like, I'm no longer 2025. I cannot run and, stay up all night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and that is the other issues, like their appetite changes and their sleep patterns really changes too.
Wow.
So you have to really be careful. And also some of the things that the doctors were saying, I could kind of agree with, but not agree. It's like the doctor was saying, oh, he has to cut back on salt and sugar. I'm like, I'm sorry, he's 96.
Right.
I will let him eat candy all day if he wants to.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
mean, there's quality of life, but I'm like, he's 96.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. Yeah. Let them live the way he wants
Yes.
to live, right? That yeah. Let him enjoy his right.
Yes.
His
Because you never know.
right, exactly.
I mean,
Um
one of
uh-huh.
our church members, unfortunately, from the time he fell, It was 6 months until he unfortunately died. So you
Yeah.
never know how long. So it's just like, let them do what they need to do as long as it's not harmful to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You touch a little bit about finance. Now, how are you able to juggle all this? What is that like? And there's an overlap with finance and healthcare and copay and deductibles, et cetera, et cetera. How are you able to sort of wrap your head around that?
Well, fortunately, my brother and I do subsidize him. So, but we don't know how long we could subsidize him. You can, if you, there are ways where if he's a dependent, you could write off a little bit about him, but unfortunately, it's not that much. And also, I think they can't really get a lot of money from Social Security. You'd have to check with a tax person. But I think in order for you to be claim your parent as a dependent, I think they can't have more than like $5,500 in income, which is crazy, and that's nothing. So you have, but I think there's ways you could also get things on sale. So since my dad is in assisted living, they do have a fee for incontinence. So one of the things is that I buy everything for him. I'm not charged an additional $390 a month for it.
Wow, really?
Yes. So I give him like depends. I give him so the diapers that wrap as a pull up as well as a
Right.
wrap around, and there's also the bed pads. And one of the
Okay.
things I do is before he had really heavy incontinence, I used to use dog pads because it was like
Right.
so much cheaper. Dog pads were like 20 cents versus the bed pads would be 90 cents. So
Really?
there are ways you could do it. Yeah. And I always go love Walgreens. They have a lot of sales. So the dog pads are like 22 by 22 and the bed pads are like 35 by 29. So if it's light, you could get away with. Also, I put it on the wheelchair. So if he does have an accident, it's easy for me to, take it out rather than having to clean the entire wheelchair.
Wow. 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 Fascinating. How about other financial issues, such as, or this is where sort of the legal issues come in, right? Whether he has any assets and deciding who's going to sort of be in charge with that. And what was that experience like?
So when I was looking around for assisted living, there are some assisted living where they will not let you in unless you have $250,000 in assets.
Really?
There are some that you have to almost like prepay. So you have to really, really check and see what they are. And there's also a lot of them do have Medicare, but it's very hard to get into. So one of the things I'm trying to do is kind of pay the full price, and then hopefully put him on Medicare afterwards once he kind of like has less assets. I think the rule is like less than 50,000. You could check on the assisted living if they're able to help you.
Okay. Yeah.
So for the assisted living, there's usually a rental fee. I put him in a shared room, so it's cheaper. And then there's levels of care depending on what it is. Some of them are tricky because they will discount your almost like an apartment rental,
Okay.
but it's a la carte. So every time he needs to be escorted, there's a fee. Every time he needs something to be help bathing, there's a fee. So you have to really check on what he needs and they will assess him. And sometimes it's like lower and then sometimes it will gradually go up. So you have to be prepared for that.
Wow. How were you able to sort of identify an assisted living facility? Because this is all very new to me, at least, assisted living facilities. How do you
So
go about
there
doing that?
is something called a home. I think it's called a home for mom, which a couple of my friends have said something about it
Mhm.
because if they're not near their parents, they have to use like a guide. So, but with me, I did use them and I did a lot of interviews. I'm in northern New Jersey. I think I visited maybe 14 facilities in
Really?
northern New Jersey. And so one of my topics was I wanted something smaller because I think
Mhm.
it's better for him. There's somewhere where you have like 400 people in a facility. I don't want it that big. This one is under 100. And I also wanted him to be able to like eat. Like they have like a cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
And some facilities do have a cafeteria, but it's tiered because of the number of people they have. So there's
Mm-hmm.
like 3 to 4 seating hours. And I'm like, no, I want like one general one where
Right.
everyone's there and they get to meet everybody. And so I was looking all over. I mean, and sometimes it's just like it didn't have the right fit.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
I know, I mean, my dad is very friendly and he loves everybody, but sometimes we needed more diversity. We needed more like smaller facility and we needed more social. So that's one of the things I looked at is you have to like know what your parent needs. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes are they more active? Are they less active? Do they want to be by themselves? Because there's also some things where you can't just put them in there. You still have to check.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I do want to say is build a village. Last year, when I had to be gone for 3 months, I
Mm-hmm.
reached out to his church and said, hey, I'm going to be gone for 3 months. Can you guys visit him once a week to see what he needs? Just you need to build a village. It's just very important.
So the coverage for the assisted living facility, how does that work? Would the VA cover for that? Would Medicare cover for that? Would the supplemental insurance cover for that? How does this all sort of come
So
together?
the Medicare does not pay for assisted living unless you have nothing, really nothing.
Right.
And unfortunately, you're not going to be in the best facility if
Okay.
you for that, unless you started off at a really nice facility and then they'll work with you after 2 or 3 years for
Mm-hmm.
Medicare, for like to get Medicare. So everything goes through his bank. And then, so depending on what it is, we have to give them a check, like usually 2 or 3 days before the end of the month. And so I get my brother Venmo the money, and then I pull everything that I can, and then I just give them a big check, which I cry over every month.
Well, and what about does Medicaid spin down comes into play at any point?
You have to work with them. A lot of facilities will not do Medicaid first,
Okay.
so you just have to kind of like, and that's one of the things is they know they're going to lose money, so they want you there maybe for a year, and then just kind of have to spend it down.
Wow. 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 This is terrific.
And it's very confusing. I just feel so bad about the people who are having to do this.
Yeah, and can you imagine as an elder if you have no one like who to help you? I mean, what you said is just so critical, building a village and what that entails. And when I was talking to someone and they taught, when I mentioned that I'm looking at legal, finance, access to healthcare, they said that is such a huge undertaking and it's true. But at the same time, whatever little information that you're sharing, it's just so helpful for our listeners. Going back to building a village, so how have you built your village?
Fortunately, my dad was very, very active with his church. So I've been using a lot of church. Some of my friends have checked up on him if I'm on travel. So, because no matter how good a facility it is, you have to just, it helps them, if someone's there just to talk to them,
Sure.
even if it's just for half an hour. And
Hmm.
then, and fortunately, the one I use, Care One, does, when I was on travel, we had a weekly call or a bi-weekly call, depending on my schedule. And they would tell me, oh, your dad's doing this, your dad's doing this, and all that stuff. So I did feel like I was with him. And so, unfortunately, also, he's not very technology worthy, like a lot of
Right.
people. So sometimes they would use the phone for him and then put him on with me. And so it actually also helps them with their cognitive. They look to see when they're talking to me or talking to my brother, how he's answering the questions, how he's processing. And that's
Mm,
one of the things I actually wanted to mention is that we thought he had really, right now he does have like light dementia, but last year we thought he had really like full onset dementia. And it
mhm.
turned out to be a UTI. So what happens is a UTI, which the elderly gets a lot, if you have it really badly, it will affect your brain.
Really?
Yes, you have to be on heavy meds.
Wow.
So after that, we did find out he had a continuous UTI,
Uh,
and when we found out that after the third month, they were like it was really bad. He was really confused and then kind of like getting aggressive, and then we put him on heavy meds for like 72 hours. He got to be really good after that.
wow. And how did you again discover that he had the UTI?
He was very belligerent. And then when he fell, I talked to the doctor and they said, let's just do all the tests. And that's when we found out he had a really bad UTI.
Wow.
And it's very common with the elderly, they said.
Anything else you think you'd like to share with our listeners?
There is something called respite care that a lot of assisted living have, and it was a lifesaver for me,
Okay.
where it's not cheap, but it's not really expensive. And I call it senior summer camp for seniors, where
Okay.
if you need a break, like
Uh-huh.
if you're on travel, sometimes when I have to be on travel, or if you're going on a family vacation, or you just need a break, it's usually 30 days, and then it's reasonable depending on which one you do. And so it's basically they cover all your meals, they give him OTPT, and the room is fully furnished. And so, and also it helps that if he needs an additional PT or OT after
Mm-hmm.
the 60 days, they'll give it to you. Can just take your parent there, and it's so much easier for you and for them that you don't have to really worry about them if you're going to go on vacation. And we all need a break. If you're doing parenting of your parents or else with the kids, you could
Right.
only handle so much, especially for women when we were the sandwich generation.
Right.
So it let me really concentrate on work when he was there, and they were really good about contacting me if he needs help or just kind of figuring out what's going on with him. And it's
Wow.
called respite care. It was just great, I thought.
Mm-hmm. And how were you able to get coverage for that? Or you
That you have to pay for yourself,
pay out of pocket?
unfortunately,
Yeah.
but it was worth it for me just to take a break and concentrate on what I needed to do.
Yeah. Does a VA cover for that as well, or no? That's
No, I
separate.
mean, and there are some, I did talk to there is a couple of VA assisted living down in kind of southern Jersey. And when I
Mm-hmm.
talked to them, it was like a 24-page like form for them to get in. And the waiting was depending on the facility. There's 3 facility, I think in New Jersey was anywhere from 6 to 12 months for a
Wow.
VA assisted
Really?
living facility
To wait.
to
Wow.
wait to get in. And the other thing I did want to say is that a lot of the veterans do want to be, I don't know if you don't have a family plot, there is veterans
Mm-hmm.
cemeteries. So
Mm-hmm.
Arlington is hard to get into, but there's a lot in New Jersey. The one I
Mm-hmm.
chose for my dad was called Washington's Crossing. It's off of New Hope in Philadelphia, in
Uh-huh.
Pennsylvania. So I got all the forms and I just kind of like so that when something happens, they know he's there, that they have a space for him. And so it's also cheaper. It'll save me a lot of money because they'll take care of the cemetery fees.
Wow. I've never heard of that before.
It's a beautiful facility. I went there. I mean, and they take care, and you could actually have a volunteer color guard. So, they'll do the little
Mm-hmm.
flags, they'll
That's
do the
fun.
little fake
Mm-hmm.
shooting. And
Yeah.
so it was really nice. So there's a place if you're cremated or if you're in a casket.
Wow. And this is covered through the VA, you said?
Yes, it's a VA because
Benefit. Yeah.
it's a benefit. And you will save money because you don't have to do like cemetery fees. I know a lot of people have that. So the only thing is that it's hard to get into Arlington, but there's a lot of other facilities. And if you're in New Jersey, it's not that bad. We're around South Orange. I think it's maybe about an hour and a half to go there.
Wow.
You
Okay.
will have fees, but once he's laid out, it will save you like at least 2,000, I think 3,000, depending on what you're doing.
Wow.
Because
Really?
unfortunately, the average funeral in New Jersey is like 10,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. 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 I thought it was much more, but wow. Yeah.
It does. It
Yeah.
depends. I've
It
seen
depends on what
12,000.
you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of didn't want to do like, unfortunately, like the cheapest funeral
Right.
casket. I
Right.
was like,
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so it's going up. I mean, it's just so expensive.
Mm-hmm. 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 Wow. This is terrific. I never thought about the funeral arrangements and expense. It falls in line with the my the previous episode with end of life doula.
Yes, I saw that. That's a big thing coming up now.
Yeah, yeah. So, what about other arrangements as you're talking about funeral arrangements? The legal issues around estate planning and finance planning, and what has been your experience around that?
Unfortunately, my dad was not really good with money, so he didn't have a lot of assets. So, of
Hmm.
course, you have to make sure that all the beneficiaries are either going to be my brother or myself. If you have the pensions or anything, you have to make sure that everything's kind of up to date because you never know what's going to happen when
Right,
they reach, after 90, how
right.
long they're going to be, even if you think they're fine.
Hmm. Hmm.
There is something that I got from St. Barnabas called the Five Wishes, where it's just like easy to read about all the things you need to do.
Yes.
And the good thing also about the hospital as well as assisted living, they'll give you a little guide about everything you should have done. It's
Oh,
like,
really?
yes, like before my dad even went there, just like, is he social? What does he like to do? What's his medication? Does he like to sleep in? Does he like to be up early? Stuff like that. And it really makes you think about what your parent needs.
Right, right, right.
Because
Oh,
one of the
mhm.
places, like one of the people in Care One, which I love, is that he has a big sign like, asleep, do not wake until 7 a.m.
Right,
And he
right.
puts that there starting at like 5 p.m.
Anything last minute you would like to share?
I just think build a village, do a lot of research. As people from New Jersey, we pay a lot in taxes. So use all the facilities and all the help you could get. There's a lot of senior resources from South Orange, Maplewood, a lot of places. There's the free transportation. So just try to see what you have and talk to people. I found a lot of resources or like what from people I talked to at McDonald's.
Yeah.
So just talk to people, and that's what I said. And it really does help.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I would say it's like it is expensive, but you could make more money, but you can never make more time with your parent.
Yes, that is very true. Very true. I love that. And on that note, I want to thank you very much for the interview
Thank you.
and also thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much for everything. Hopefully, we'll get better health care and services in the next few years. I'm hoping.
Yes, yes. Me as well. Me as well.